All right, buckle up. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to cut through all the noise and deliver only the actionable insights from a mountain of sources tailored just for you. Today, we're on a pretty critical mission. We're going to try and distill the chaos of the financial world on December 19th, 2025. And we're boiling it down to just two dominant forces. We're not looking for big directional pivots. We're looking at a contradiction. Stability at the top, but masking some really high-stakes volatility just underneath. We're calling this the liquidity signal plus event-driven market. So on one side, you have the central banks, meticulously managing the plumbing of the whole financial system. That's the technical liquidity signal. And on the other, you've got these rapid, sometimes violent market reactions to a single piece of corporate news, the event-driven chaos.
I think that framing is spot on. But it's crucial to add that the market's intense focus on these operational technicals is because the major directional moves, like dramatic rate hikes or cuts, they're on pause right now. We're in an environment of, let's call it, constrained gradualism. And that forces the market to find new barometers,
And that's where these short-end liquidity signals come in.
Exactly. They step in as the new proxy for overall systemic health.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with that macro lever, the technical solution that's stabilizing the short end. The New York Fed's action this week, the reserve management purchases, or RMP, that's the undisputed focus. Now, RMP sounds like really complex central bank jargon. For you listening, what is it, and why has this specific tool suddenly become like the headline driver?
So RMP, or reserve management purchases, is really just the NY Fed's way of actively managing the reserves in the banking system. Think of bank reserves as the fuel in a car's tank. You just need enough to prevent stalling. So when the Fed does RMP, they're arranging to buy approximately $40 billion in short-term Treasury securities in that first month. And this is not quantitative easing. It's not QE. That's a broad stimulus tool for lowering long-term borrowing costs.
Right.
RMP is explicitly tactical. The core purpose, and they say this in their notes, is to supplement reserve balances and stabilize the short-end market. They're just fine-tuning the dial, making sure there's enough liquidity to prevent technical stresses and overnight lending rates.
$40 billion. I mean, that sounds huge to the average person, but how does that really stack up against the sheer scale of the system? Are they signaling confidence with this, or are they just managing a sort of underlying fear that the plumbing might be tightening up a bit too much?
That is the exact question investors are wrestling with. And while $40 billion is significant, its power really lies in its strategic placement. It interacts directly with the whole short-end ecosystem. Things like the overnight reverse repo facility, the ONRP, and the standing repo facility. RMP basically ensures the reserves are where they need to be, which impacts the distribution and supply of short-term cash. And this stabilization effort, it has a measurable impact. You can see it on the market's most sensitive instrument, the 2-year Treasury yield. It's sitting right in that tight 3.46% to 3.50% range. It's a direct indicator that the market sees RMP as the #1 signal for liquidity health right now. It's outweighing almost everything else.
And we can't forget the broader macro context here. The reason RMP is even necessary. Inflation is, it's still decelerating, but it's stubbornly above that 2% target. And at the same time, employment is robust. We just keep seeing strong job figures.
That tension is key, absolutely. Because inflation is persistent but not surging, and employment is strong, the Fed is. It's essentially locked in a holding pattern.
So they can't cut too fast.
They can't. They can't unleash a massive round of rate cuts without risking reigniting inflation, but they also can't afford technical stresses in the overnight markets. So RMP lets them manage that operational risk while keeping a cautious, gradual posture on the pace of rate cuts. It's surgical precision in a world that wants a blunt instrument.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So we have technical control in the debt markets, but that stability is not translating to the growth sector. And this contradiction is where it gets really interesting. The VIX, the fear index, it recently peaked near 17.6, and it's holding steady, high 16, 17. So defensive indexes like VOR are stable, but the tech-heavy QQQM, trading around 250, 260, it's reacting violently to every single headline. So what happens when that macro control meets event-driven chaos?
The chaos is being driven by very specific non-macro news. And right now, the NVDA factor is the centerpiece of all that volatility. We're talking about the reports around the conditional approval for exporting their H200 chips to China. This news is a classic example of, announced good news that's layered with massive regulatory uncertainty.
Conditional approval, so that's the key word.
That's the key word. It means a company can ship, but potentially with significant fees or licensing conditions or volume restrictions attached. So the short-term benefit selling into a huge market, that gets priced in immediately. But the conditions are this huge unknown variable, and that creates extreme nervousness. It forces high-frequency trading and algorithmic funds to just amplify every tiny rumor, making the entire semiconductor and AI sector intensely sensitive.
So investors are basically trading on speculation about the fine print of a government approval, not the fundamentals of the tech itself. And that geopolitical tension is the hidden amplifier, pushing the VIX higher, even when the broad market looks calm. And that sensitivity, I assume, spills right into the highest risk corner of the market, crypto.
Absolutely. When the semiconductor sector feels that heat of uncertainty, the next logical stop is the crypto space, which is built, entirely on speculative risk. The nervousness is palpable. The crypto fear and greed index is just cemented in the extreme fear range right now. We saw Bitcoin, BTC fall from near 90,000 down to that $85,000 to $86,000 range. And the defining part of that drop, it wasn't organic selling.
Oh.
It was leverage liquidations. This is a crucial technical point you really need to understand.
Okay, so what exactly is a leveraged liquidation? Why does it cause such a dramatic, accelerated price drop compared to just regular spot selling?
So think of leveraging as borrowing money to amplify your position. You put down, say, $1,000, you borrow $9,000, and you buy $10,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Right.
A small drop in BTC's price can wipe out your initial $1,000. And when the price falls below a certain threshold, your liquidation price, the exchange automatically sells your assets to repay the loan.
That's a forced sale?
A forced systemic sale. So when Bitcoin, or ETH, which is around 2,820 to 2,840, sees a rapid drop, it triggers these mass liquidation events. This creates immense non-organic downward pressure. It's a chain reaction, and it accelerates the price decline far beyond what normal selling would do.
That explains why the volatility just feels so sudden and punishing. And speaking of punishing, we have to touch on the extreme risk you find deeper in the altcoin space. These assets aren't just sensitive, they carry immense operational danger.
Oh, they absolutely do. We're seeing extremely high speculative risk in smaller tokens, like the obscure asset HYPE trading in the low double digits, and also this rising trend of pre-stocks. Yeah, things like purported Anthropic or XAI shares being tokenized and traded on platforms like Solana. These are not regulated products. If you are playing in this space, you need a high-risk alert. Focus purely on operational risk. You have to verify contract depth, custody arrangements. If a contract fails or there's a problem with the tokenization, your capital can just disappear.
Wow.
Instantly, with no legal recourse.
Wow.
The potential gain is huge, but the operational risk and the risk of catastrophic failure are equally massive.
So, bringing it all back together, our current environment demands a dual vigilance. Risk control is paramount. You're guided by the technical RMP stuff on the macro front and event verification. Did the H200 shipments actually happen?
Okay.
On the other. Beyond these big indexes, what key regulatory or expansion developments should we be watching? The things that signal long-term direction.
We're tracking two key stories. They really highlight how major players are managing compliance and expansion, which are huge long-term themes. First, Circle Internet Group, CRCL, has successfully secured an ADGM license in Abu Dhabi. This is significant. It's a compliance win that promotes regulated adoption of USDC in the Middle East. It shows stablecoin operators are proactively seeking out these stringent regulatory environments.
They're playing the long game.
They are. And second, Coinbase, Koyanen, is making a strategic play. They're resuming registration in India and planning a full fiat on-ramp for 2026. India is a massive potential market. This move is a key re-entry theme. It shows regulated exchanges are betting on global expansion, even where it's been tough before.
Okay, that gives a clear picture of how regulated finance is preparing for the future, while all this technical volatility is happening right now.
Yeah.
So, given everything we've discussed, what's the strategic takeaway for someone trying to navigate this contradiction between RMP control and event-driven chaos?
The approach really has to be multi-layered. For broad indices, I'd stick to phased buying, dollar cost average through the volatility. But critically, you have to use hedging. We recommend hedging with short-term debt instruments or gold.
And why is that?
Because those assets specifically counter the effects of the Fed's targeted RMP. They provide a buffer against fluctuations in that short-end yield sensitivity. And remember the NVDA rule, view the H200 news as announced good news that requires verification. Don't buy the rumor until you see confirmed order books and physical shipments. The market has proven it will punish anticipation faster than it rewards reality.
A perfectly distilled set of insights for today. Now, for one final provocative thought for you to mull over, something that connects this whole RMP discussion to the global economy as we wait for the next data points. If the Fed is actively managing domestic reserves and injecting this short-end liquidity to ensure stability, what does the sustained relative strength of the US dollar tell us about global liquidity conditions? The DXY is holding around 98.3 to 98.6. If the Fed is making cash flow at home, why is the dollar still comparatively so strong on the world stage? Is this a sign of domestic health or global weakness driving capital flight? That tension is definitely worth exploring on your own. That's a wrap on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.